At the Steiner Brothers versus Doom with Woman, Nancy. I'm trying to think if she was Nancy Sullivan at this point. When did she marry Kevin?
Oh, I believe prior to this, yeah, she was with Kevin from the time that Kevin was 80s, mid late 80s, maybe even earlier. I think she came into the business when she was like 16. And, we were talking about this before, saying, hanging out with Kevin Sullivan and Purple Haze and all these guys, King IK, and it's probably not the best schooling, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Having said that, because Woman's actually accompanying Doom here, it wouldn't last very long because Kevin Sullivan was actually meant to accompany Doom, but WCW management pulled him from managerial duty. And I think when we talk about Nancy, the first thing we all think about is her terrible end, of course.
Absolutely.
And it's a sad thing, especially when just career-wise and on television-wise, she had a really interesting career as an on-screen character. She was a valet for a lot of people. She was in ECW. She valeted the Sandman. Like my first ever tape of ECW, that she was November to November 95, I think.
Yeah.
Which you weren't on, because I think you were still in WWF at the time. But having said that, why don't we put away the bad stuff and let's talk about the good stuff about Nancy as a person and as a on-screen character as well?
Yeah. Well, first of all, not saying anything anybody out there is not aware of, an extremely beautiful woman, right? I mean, she wrestling at this time was transforming. It was going from women valets and like the baby doll types who were great and how they pursued their approach to the business, but suddenly now like Miss Elizabeth and Woman and Nancy. Later would come the advent of the Francines and the Beulahs. Wrestling, as we all know, has long since been called soap opera for men, right? And so I can't imagine any 13, 14-year-old girl or boy out there saying, oh, man, look at these incredibly beautiful and talented women. I don't want to watch that. I'd rather see a guy wrestle some big old ogre guy with a wart over here and a big old beer guy. But she was also very intelligent. That's the thing that always struck me was you could sit down with her and have a conversation on a wide range of topics, and I was always mystified by that because once I later found out that she had come into wrestling at such a young age, which, we've talked about in previous episodes about, the debauchery of the bubble that we live in. She had her own course, and we all do. But you could sit down and have a conversation with her about politics, about religion, about this, about that, and and it not just be a surface level or surface deep conversation. You could get into real deep conversations with her. She also had this almost like Manx cat ability to defend herself. Like she was not a shrinking violet at all, and she would. She knew how to handle, some drunk guy in a bar. She knew how to handle some overly zealous fan at the airport, and handled it far more tactfully than most of us would. So it's again, without getting into the tragedy of the end, I think there's a whole lot more to Nancy that fans out there would be surprised to find out. And if you haven't dug into Nancy and researched it for the viewers out there, I would suggest you do, because there's a lot of tales that are, oh my God, I wouldn't think that. Geez, that's different. It's a really in-depth story about this young woman and one of the people that helped, for all the divas that there are today. And we hear that term so often. There's the old saying, you stand on the shoulders of giants. And for all the women in the business, you need to look back to the Nancys and to the Medusas and the Sherry Martells and the Mullahs, as to providing that foundation that suddenly opened that door, flung it wide open. And some could argue in many cases that the Divas division is probably more popular than the men's division. So that all started with all those names I just mentioned, and several others I'm sure I'm missing, Wendy Richter and, so many others like that. But, Nancy, again, it's like the oft refrain in this business, gone too soon. You wonder what Nancy would have been able to accomplish if Nancy were still around and able to divvy off some of her wisdom and what she had learned and experienced to these young divas. It's just, once that book is closed and put on the shelf, that's it. That's the end of it. Unless some of these young ladies go start digging out and looking for that book. Hey, I heard there's this fountain of information about the early years of divadom. Check it out, because Nancy was, like I said, not a shrinking violet and a lot more complex than people would imagine.
Who do you think was Nancy's best charge? Like, who were the best pairing, Nancy and so on? Because obviously she was with Benoit, Kevin Sullivan. We're talking on screen. Kevin Sullivan, the whole host of people down in Florida, Doom briefly. I remember Ric Flair. She managed Ric Flair for a time in '96 in the early days of Nitro, along with like Deborah McMichael and Miss Elizabeth, I think.
Sure.
And that was that was a great little group. I thought that was a really good presentation. But who do you Sandman, of course? Who do you think Nancy worked with best?
Well, I'm partial. I thought she was great with all of them. She again, you got this woman with this beautiful gown standing ringside, not especially hard on the eyes, right? But to me, that's like the shiny bauble that draws your attention, and you're constantly looking at these little nuanceable things. I thought she was great when she was with Kevin. Great later with Doom and all that. She knew what she was doing. And I thought she gave a lot of element to Chris Benoit that Chris himself didn't have. But, obviously I'm partial. But I thought with Sandman, you saw Nancy a lot more out in the forefront. It was almost like Nancy was orchestrating that whole thing. And it worked somehow. Almost this Beauty and the Beast. Sorry, Hack. But it's almost this Beauty and the Beast aspect of you got this gorgeous woman out there and this chain smoking, beer swilling, cane swinging, crazy guy. But again, Nancy could have gone out there with you and done great. She knew what she was doing. I credit that back to, I'm sure, with a lot of other different, maybe more negative influences. Kevin Sullivan and Purple Haze and IAK and all those guys. All the other stuff aside, all three of those guys had a really strong grasp of the psychology of our business, the storytelling in our business, and you couldn't help, if you're Nancy, sitting around 25 hours a day with these guys, picking some of that up. So Nancy definitely knew her way around this business.